I woke up early in the morning with a peaceful heart and a fresh spirit. The first thing I did was make my bed neatly. Because I love starting the day with order, I cleaned my room, which made me feel calm and happy inside. After that, I washed my face, letting the cool water refresh me and give me energy. Then I wore my work clothes with confidence, ready to face the day's journey. Every small action gave me joy, reminding me that discipline, cleanliness, and gratitude create a beautiful beginning for a productive and meaningful day. When I opened the door, the morning light entered my room and filled it with brightness. I loved the way it warmed my heart and lifted my spirit. The air, however, felt a little strange, as if it might challenge our work for the day. Still, I chose to believe that everything happens for a reason. Maybe this change carries something better within it, or perhaps it will not last the whole day. With that hope in mind, I began my morning with faith, ready to embrace whatever blessing the day might bring. That morning started with a little funny mistake. I had been busy cleaning my room when I suddenly realized I hadn't even put on my clothes yet. I smiled to myself and said, "Ops, let me get dressed and be ready for the day." Quickly, I put on my site clothes, styled my hair neatly, and prepared myself with confidence. Feeling ready, I stepped outside and had my breakfast to give me energy before heading to the site. On my way, while crossing the road, something colorful and joyful caught my attention. A band was celebrating Gifata in Wolita Soto. The music, the dance, and the spirit of the celebration filled the air with excitement. I enjoyed the moment and even took a picture just to share the beauty of it later. That small pause reminded me how life gives us unexpected little joys, even on busy mornings. When I finally reached the site, I found that the workers had already started their tasks. At first, I thought I was late, but then I realized why. The store was close to them, and the guard knew them well, so it was easy for them to begin without waiting for me. Honestly, I found that to be a good thing. Since my home is farther from the site, their nearness gave them an advantage. Of course, as a leader, I know I should usually arrive before my workers, but sometimes life doesn't go exactly as planned. We cannot be perfect all the time, and that is okay. What matters is showing up, being responsible, and continuing with commitment. That morning taught me that even small imperfections can carry hidden blessings like joy, laughter, and teamwork. The 25-day house project. Part 1, clearing, excavation, and foundation. Day 15. The project began with excitement in the air. This wasn't just another house, it was a special mission. Our client, together with the regional administration and consultants from the southern nations, nationalities, and People's Region Building Construction Office, had a big heart. The goal was to build a 1-bedroom, 1 living room, 1 kitchen, and 1 corridor house for an elder who didn't have the strength to build on their own. It was a beautiful idea, and we were proud to be part of it. Now, as I take you through the journey, remember this is not only construction, it's life. It's laughter, it's challenges, and it's teamwork. Day 1, site clearing. The first day was dedicated to clearing the site, but it wasn't just an empty land waiting for us. Oh no, there was an old house sitting there. I laughed with the workers and said, "This house has been standing longer than our supervisor's beard, but today it's retiring." The demolition was noisy, dusty, and sweaty. Some workers tied cloths around their faces like cowboys, joking they were in a Wild West movie. One guy coughed in the dust cloud and shouted, "This dust is stronger than Ethiopian coffee." Everyone laughed, even though we were half choking. By the end of the day, the site was cleared. A fresh canvas, and like every painter before the first brushstroke, we stood there imagining the picture of what would rise in the coming days. Day 2, bulk excavation. Excavation began. You'd think digging is simple, just soil, shovels, and sweat. But let me tell you, on a construction site, even digging can turn into comedy. One worker was digging too slowly, and another teased him. "Are you searching for gold or making a house?" He shot back, "If I find gold, I'm quitting this site." Everyone laughed so hard that even the pickaxes seemed lighter. But jokes aside, we needed precision. The soil was stubborn in some places, soft in others. As a surveyor, I walked around checking levels, making sure we weren't making a swimming pool instead of a foundation. At one point, I said, "Careful, boys. If you dig too deep, we'll find China." That got a good round of laughter. By sunset, the trenches were starting to form, and the skeleton of the house was visible. Day 3, trench excavation. The trenches needed more shaping. This day tested patience and teamwork. Shovels clanked, buckets moved, and sweat poured like rain. There was this funny moment. One worker slipped into the trench and landed sitting perfectly, like he was on a chair. Instead of panicking, he grinned and said, "Boss, see? I made a sofa for the living room already." We couldn't stop laughing. The trenches were soon ready, and we could almost see the lines of the future home. Day 4, lean concrete. Ah, the smell of fresh cement. If you've been on a site, you know it. That earthy, industrial perfume. One worker spread it with pride and said, "Who needs cologne when you have cement fragrance?" Mixing was another story. We had sand, cement, water, and stones, our version of cooking. Someone joked, "If only this was injera batter, we'd all be happy." But instead of injera, we poured lean concrete carefully into the foundation trenches. We watched it set, knowing this was the first strong layer of the elders' new home. It felt symbolic, like laying the first brick of hope. Day 5, masonry begins. Now the real fun began, masonry. Block after block, the walls began to rise. Did you know for just 1 square meter you need about 13.5 blocks? We carried so many that one worker said, "Boss, I think tonight I'll dream of blocks chasing me." The rhythm of laying blocks was like music. Smear mortar, place block, tap it gently, repeat. Soon, the walls whispered the promise of a house. Backfilling followed. Sand was shoveled back into gaps. But sand has its own plan. It loves to sneak into shoes. One guy shook his shoe and said, "Boss, if I shake hard enough, I can build another house from my shoe sand." We laughed, but it was true. Construction is a messy, sandy, cement-covered love story. Part 2, hardcore beams and lintels, day 6 to 10. Day 6, hardcore filling. The day started with trucks bringing hardcore stone. As soon as they dumped it, the ground shook like a small earthquake. One worker shouted, "Boss, is that the sound of our salary dropping?" We all burst out laughing. Hardcore filling isn't glamorous, it's heavy lifting. Stone by stone, spreading, compacting, leveling. The stones had sharp edges, and some workers joked, "These stones don't want to be in the ground. They want to cut our shoes." We spread them carefully, layer by layer, because hardcore isn't just about throwing stones in a hole, it's about giving the foundation strength. Someone asked, "Boss, why do we call it hardcore?" I replied, "Because if you don't respect it, it will break your back." That line got repeated all day like a site proverb. By evening, the ground was strong and stable. Hardcore might look rough, but it's the quiet hero under every house. Day 7, preparing for beams. With hardcore done, it was time for formwork and reinforcement for beams. Steel bars arrived, long and heavy, shining in the morning sun. Workers lifted them onto their shoulders, and one joked, "Now I know how it feels to carry my mother-in-law's expectations." Bending and tying the bars is an art. The steel sang under the hammer as we shaped it into cages. Someone said, "These are like iron snakes. We're taming them." It was tiring work, but we all felt proud watching the skeleton of the house's strength come together. The formwork was placed carefully, plumb lines checked, levels adjusted. I walked around like a school teacher checking homework. Straight line, correct spacing, proper tie, don't let me catch mistakes. I teased. The workers laughed, but they also knew precision was serious. Day 8, reinforced concrete beams. The mixing machine roared to life, sand, gravel, cement, water. The rhythm was like music to a construction ear. The concrete was poured into the beam formwork, slowly filling up like porridge into a pot. We vibrated it to remove air bubbles because nobody wants weak beams. One worker held the vibrator and joked, "Boss, I think my arms will still be shaking tonight." We checked every side with water levels, measuring tapes, and sharp eyes. Precision is love in construction. If your beams are crooked, your whole house is in trouble. I told the team, think of beams like the spine of the house. If the spine bends, everything bends. By the end of the day, the beams stood firm, solid, like the backbone of a giant. Day 9, water testing and checks. A construction site isn't just building, it's also testing. Today was about making sure everything we poured and placed was correct. We poured water to check leaks, checked alignments, and measured walls. One worker, tired of my constant checking, joked, "Boss, even my wife doesn't check me this much." Everyone laughed, even me. But he was right, I was checking everything like a detective. At one corner, I noticed a small misalignment and asked the mason to fix it. He sighed and said, "Boss, This wall is like my child. It doesn't listen. But with teamwork, we corrected it. By the end of the day, the site felt like a disciplined soldier, everything in order, ready for the next battle. Day 10, lintels and more masonry. Today we placed lintels above the doors and windows. Suddenly, the house began to look alive. Openings for light and air appeared. It was like the house was growing eyes and mouths. The masons joked, "Now the house can see us and complain if we're late." We also continued with blockwork. More walls rose, and the shape of each room was now clear. Standing inside, I could already imagine the elder walking through the living room, cooking in the kitchen, resting in the bedroom. That vision gave us strength to keep working. Mortar stuck to hands, clothes, even faces. One worker pointed at another and said, "Look at him, he's turning into a cement statue." Laughter spread like wildfire, and for a moment, the tiredness disappeared. Part 3, day 11, 15 in the same storytelling, funny, and professional style. Here's how it unfolds. Part 3, more masonry, plastering begins, and roof preparations, day 11, 15. After the solid foundation and beams, we were ready to tackle more masonry and start prepping for the roof. The days ahead were filled with mud, laughter, and the kind of teamwork that makes you feel like family. Day 11, rising walls. Day 11 kicked off with a burst of energy. The masons arrived early, ready to stack more blocks. As the walls climbed higher, so did our spirits. One mason exclaimed, "At this rate, we'll need a ladder just to reach the roof." With each block we laid, the house began to take shape. We were creating rooms, and the walls felt like the bones of our future home. I couldn't help but joke, if these walls could talk, they'd say, "What's the plan for dinner?" Mortar was mixed, applied, and smoothed out. It was a messy job, but we embraced the chaos. One worker, covered in mortar, joked, "I'm auditioning for a role as a plastered superhero." By the end of the day, the walls stood strong and proud, reaching toward the sky like a toddler stretching after a nap. Day 12, plastering begins. Day 12 marked the start of plastering. The walls were ready for their first coat, and excitement buzzed in the air. I gathered the team and said, "Today, we're giving these walls a makeover. Think of it as their spa day." As we applied the plaster, I couldn't help but notice the artistry involved. Smoothing out the surface felt like painting, but with a much heavier brush. One worker, trying to catch an even surface, quipped, "If only my relationship could be plastered over like this." We mixed and applied, and laughter echoed as we shared plastering tips. "Remember, if it's not perfect, just claim its rustic charm," I encouraged. The team roared with laughter, knowing full well that every imperfection would tell a story. By the end of the day, the walls were transformed. They stood not only as structural components, but as canvases of our hard work. Day 13, roof preparations. With plastered walls feeling more like home, Day 13 was all about roof preparations. We gathered the materials, and I asked the team, "Who's ready to play architect today?" The trusses arrived, long wooden beams that looked like giant toothpicks. As we lifted them into place, one worker joked, "These trusses are like my diet plan, hard to lift and even harder to follow." Aligning and securing the trusses was a team effort. We worked together, checking angles and making sure everything fit like a puzzle. If only my kids could assemble their toys this well, I laughed as I saw the precision in our work. The roof structure began to take shape, and I could already picture the shingles that would soon crown our creation. By the end of the day, we had a framework ready for the final touches. It felt like putting a hat on a very tall friend. Day 17, window installations. Day 17 was all about windows. With the roof in place, it was time to let some light in. We unpacked the windows, and I joked, "These are the eyes of our house. Let's make sure they're looking sharp." As we began installing them, the challenge was to get everything level and secure. One worker, struggling with a particularly stubborn window, said, "This window is like my last date, hard to fit into the right spot." With teamwork and a bit of elbow grease, we managed to get each window in place. I stood back and admired our work. Look at that! Our house is starting to look like a home. Next, we'll need curtains and a nice welcome mat. The sunlight streamed in through the newly installed windows, and I could almost hear the house sighing in relief. It felt alive, ready to welcome its future inhabitants. Day 18, more masonry and final touches. With windows installed, day 18 was a day for finishing touches. We continued with masonry, focusing on any remaining walls and features that needed attention. I gathered the team and said, "Today, we're polishing our masterpiece." As we laid bricks and blocks, I reminded everyone to keep an eye on details. Remember, folks, it's the little things that make a house a home. Just like a good sandwich, it's all about the layers. One mason, jokingly serious, replied, "I'll make sure our sandwich isn't flat then." The laughter made the long day feel shorter. We added some decorative touches like arches above doorways, and I felt a sense of pride as the house transformed. By the end of the day, the structure was nearly complete, and the vision was becoming a reality. Day 19, preparing for interior work. Day 19 was all about preparing for the interior work. With the exterior nearly finished, it was time to think about what was inside. We discussed layouts, electrical wiring, and plumbing. "Today, we're the architects of comfort," I said, trying to inspire the team. We mapped out where the walls for rooms would go, and I made a few jokes about how we'd need to avoid traffic jams in the kitchen. "Let's make sure there's enough room for everyone to dance while cooking." One worker chimed in, "Only if you promise to join us." As we laid out the plans, I could see everyone's excitement grow. The house was no longer just a structure. It was becoming a home filled with possibilities. Day 20, start of interior work. Day 20 marked the official start of interior work. We began with insulation and drywall, and I felt the buzz of activity. It was time to make the inside as welcoming as the outside. As we worked, I joked, "Insulation is like a warm hug for our house. Let's wrap it up nicely." Everyone laughed, knowing how important this step was for comfort. We installed drywall, and the transformation was remarkable. Each panel we hung brought us closer to the finish line. One worker, covered in dust, joked, "I'm starting to look like a walking drywall." By the end of the day, the interior was taking shape. It was a whirlwind of activity, but the excitement was palpable. We were creating spaces that would soon be filled with laughter and life. Part 5, finishing touches, landscaping, and the big reveal, day 21-25. As we approached the final stretch of our 25-day house project, the excitement in the air was palpable. Days 21 to 25 were all about putting on the finishing touches, landscaping the surroundings, and preparing for the big reveal. Let's dive into this exhilarating conclusion. Day 21, interior finishing touches. Day 21 started with a buzz of activity. The interior was well on its way to completion, and we were ready for the finishing touches. I gathered the crew saying, "Today, we're the artists of our masterpiece." We painted walls, hung doors, and installed trim. The transformation was astonishing. One worker quipped, "If these walls could talk, they'd be asking for a makeover." As we painted, the colors began to breathe life into the rooms. I reminded everyone, each stroke is like a smile. Let's make this place shine. The team took pride in their work, and laughter filled the spaces we were creating. By the end of the day, the interior was looking warm and inviting. It felt like a home ready to welcome its first residents. Day 22, landscaping begins. With the interior coming together, day 22 shifted our focus to landscaping. We wanted the outside to match the beauty of the inside. "Today, we're the landscape artists," I announced. We started by leveling the yard and planting grass. One worker joked, "If we don't get it right, we might end up with a wild lawn." We laughed, knowing how important it was to create a welcoming outdoor space. As we planted flowers and shrubs, the house began to blend into its surroundings. I encouraged the team, "Let's make this place a paradise." Remember, good landscaping is like a good outfit. It needs to complement the house. Everyone worked hard, and by the end of the day, the yard was starting to take shape. It felt like adding the final touches to a beautiful painting. Day 23, final inspections and details. Day 23 was all about final inspections and details. I walked through each room, checking everything meticulously. One worker joked, "Boss, if you inspect me this much, I might start charging for therapy." I chuckled, but knew the importance of getting everything right. We checked lights, plumbing, and finishes. "Everything needs to shine, just like us," I said, trying to keep the mood light. As we wrapped up the inspections, I felt a sense of accomplishment. The house was not just a structure anymore. It was a home filled with potential. I reminded everyone, this is the culmination of our hard work. Let's make sure it's perfect. Day 24, the big cleanup. With everything in place, day 24 was dedicated to cleaning and prepping for the big reveal. Dust was everywhere, and it felt like a race against time. I rallied the team, saying, "Let's make this place spotless. A clean house is a happy house." We swept, wiped, and polished every surface. One worker said, "At this rate, we'll have the cleanest house in the neighborhood." We laughed, knowing that every detail mattered. As we cleaned, I reflected on the journey we'd taken together. From the initial groundwork to the finishing touches, it had been a whirlwind of hard work and laughter. By the end of the day, the house sparkled and shone. It was ready for its big debut. Day 25, the big reveal. Day 25 finally arrived, reveal day. The excitement was electric as we gathered for the final walkthrough. I stood in front of the team and said, "Today, we celebrate our hard work and the beautiful home we've created." We toured each room, admiring the fruits of our labor. The laughter echoed as we shared stories from the journey. One worker remarked, "We've built more than walls. We've built memories." As we stepped outside, the landscaping looked stunning, framing the house beautifully. I couldn't help but feel proud of what we had accomplished together. This is not just a house, it's a home filled with love, laughter, and a lot of sweat. We capped the day with a small celebration. Pizza and drinks were shared as we toasted to our success. I said, "Here's to teamwork, laughter, and a house that will hold countless memories." Reflection of Part 5. Days 21 to 25 were about celebrating the culmination of our hard work. Each finishing touch, every laugh, and the shared moments made this project truly special. As we stood in front of the finished home, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey. It wasn't just about building a structure, it was about creating a space for life to unfold, a place filled with stories, laughter, and love.